Hello and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us for today's webinar. I am Julie Matusik and I will be your presenter for today's webinar. If you are joining us online, you can listen through your computer speakers. And if you have joined us via the phone number that Zoom has provided, your line has been muted to reduce background noise. And for those of you that are online, you'll see here in the chat in just a moment, you'll see a link to the handouts for today's webinar. And so within that, you can click on that. Let us know if you have any issues accessing that. And in addition, you may put any questions that you have in the Q&A section at any time. The chat is open for you to include any comments or anything throughout the webinar. But again, we do ask that you direct any questions to the Q&A section of the Zoom console. And if you're having any tech issues, we have our live tech support. Mary is here if you have any questions at all that are tech related. And we will try to get to any questions at the end of the webinar today. And if we're unable to answer all of the questions, someone from the national network will follow up after the webinar. And also want to mention too, before we dive in, that today's PowerPoint, as well as the handouts and the recording of today's webinar, will be available on the National Family Support Network website by this time tomorrow afternoon. And last thing to mention real quick, when you exit the webinar today, an evaluation will appear automatically on your screen. So we ask that you take a moment to complete this, as it helps provide us with valuable feedback to inform future webinars. Okay, I think that's all housekeeping stuff here. And so now let's dive in. And first, we'd like to get an idea of who is here today. So take a peek at this map and you'll see that we have divided the United States into regions, and the poll was just launched. So you'll see that there's international options as well. So take a minute to let us know where you are joining us from. All right, take just another moment to let us know where you're joining us from. All right, let's peek at those results. Okay, this is really great. It looks like we have pretty even representation from the Northeast, South, West. Midwest is present too. That is wonderful. And it looks like we have representation from Canada and outside of the US and Canada as well. So if you're from outside of the US and Canada, if you want to put in the chat where you're from, we would love to hear a little bit about where you're joining from today. Okay, and then our next poll question, just to get a sense of who is here today, is affiliation. So let us know on this next poll a little bit about your affiliation. So do you represent a family resource center or a family resource center network, or maybe another sort of family support program? Maybe you're a parent leader or in early care and education. We have a couple different government options, or maybe you're a private funder. And of course, we have that other. I'll give you just another moment to let us know what your affiliation is. Thanks to everyone for letting us know in the chat where you're joining us from. Looks like across the country in US, as well as the furthest joining from that word would go to. We have the UK, so cool. Welcome in India. So glad that you're all here today. Thank you so much for joining. All right, let's take a peek at those results and look at the different representation that's here today. Great. So it looks like we have great diversity in affiliation as well. And it looks like the most folks that we have, the highest percentage is from family resource centers. So very cool. I hope you all find this webinar very helpful and informative today. All right. And then the last poll that we have for right now is the level that you work at within your organization. So we have policy systems level or management level. Maybe you have the opportunity to work at the program level, working directly with families. And of course, we have others. So feel free to let us know in the chat. Okay, take just another moment to let us know which group you represent here. Alrighty, let's see those results. Very good. Again, we have all groups represented here. That is great. Our strongest representations from the management and program and direct service level. Wonderful. Well, it's great to have a sense of who is here today. Thank you so much for weighing in on those polls. That's so helpful. All right, well, let's dive in. So we'll kick off with some contextual information, a little bit of information about the national network. So the National Family Support Network was founded back in 2011, and we are founded by the 8 states originally. And since then, the network has more than quadrupled in size and now have 37 member networks, so 36 states and the District of Columbia that represent more than 3,000 family resource centers that serve more than 2 million people annually. And we have some new members coming aboard this month. We'll see those going green as well. So stay tuned. It's really exciting to see this map going green. And the National Family Support Network's mission is to promote positive outcomes for all children, families, and communities by leveraging the collective impact of state family resource center networks and championing quality family support and strengthening practices and policies. And so, again, we especially would love to connect with representation from any state that is not currently green on the map. So, definitely connect with us after today. Our vision, in short, is that we do have the opportunity to turn that home map green. So that way we can ensure that all families have access to quality family support services in their very own communities that are supported by a strong network. All right, and so let's take a look at this together. So the National Family Support Network, we have 3 areas of work. So everything we do relates to one of these 3 areas. So the first is connecting and convening member networks to enhance their effectiveness. So increasing the connectedness amongst members for peer learning and for mutual support. Our second area of work is promoting family support best practice and evaluation. So, raising awareness of what quality family support is and promoting a common language, standards, and evaluation of it through the national implementation of the standards of quality for family strengthening and support. And the third bucket is raising the visibility of the value and the impact of family strengthening and support networks in order to strengthen and increase support for families. So that's a little bit about the national network. And let's take a look at this agenda. This is our roadmap for today. All right, so let's take a look at this together. So we will be covering the background of the standards. So you have that background information. We'll provide an overview of the standards for you. So you have that. We'll talk about standards at both the program and the systems level. So knowing that we have both represented today, we hope that you'll find that very helpful. We'll also have a Q&A, so you'll have an opportunity to ask us any questions that you may have. And we'll also share out some resources and opportunities that are available to you through the National Family Support Network. And then we'll close with that evaluation. We really appreciate your feedback. And as a reminder, as we're going through this information, if you think of any questions, just open that Q&A section of the Zoom webinar platform, and we'll ask that you put the questions in there. Feel free to continue to use the chat to connect and say hello and discuss and comment there. So, all right. So when we talk about these standards, our focus is on families, particularly families who are responsible for raising children. And so these families consist of at least one adult and one child who are related biologically, emotionally, or legally. And families may consist of one parent, two parents, grandparents, foster parents, or they may legal guardians, or they may arise from a need for mutual support. And here you can see just a little bit about the timeline of the standards being developed. So I know we have some folks here from California today. So you are in the state where it all began. So the California Network developed these standards back in 2012. And then in 2013, the National Network adopted them for national implementation. And then in 2020, the National Network engaged member networks from across the country, parent leaders, as well as Canadian family support organizations, and the Center for the Study of Social Policy to review and revise the standards with a focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion, as well as relevance for both the United States and Canada. And then that new version was approved by the NFSN membership in 2021. And so let's see. So we talk about the standards, and so why are they so important? So a few things to mention here. They help ensure that families are supported and strengthened through quality practice. They create a common language and expectations across different kinds of family strengthening programs. And they are designed to be used by all stakeholders. So public departments, foundations, community-based organizations, and families as a tool for planning, providing, and assessing quality practice. And one thing that we want to say right up front that's really important is that we are not selling these standards. The standards are available to download for free on the website, and all of the implementation tools are also available for free to download on the website. We want everyone to have access to and be able to think about quality work with families. So if you haven't already downloaded those, encourage you to do so. And when we are talking about these standards, we want to underscore that everyone can use these. I know we have family strengthening and support programs represented here, family resource centers, other similar programs. You can use the standards for as a blueprint for implementing best practice, for self-assessment, and to demonstrate quality. If you represent a direct service staff, I know we have some direct service staff here today, so welcome. And you can use the standards to reflect on and enhance your work with families. And network level folks, if you represent a network of family strengthening and support, you can use the standards for quality assurance, for training and technical assistance, and to adopt as an expectation for membership. Policymakers, you can use the standards to endorse for application in your areas of influence. And I know we had some funders here today as well. You can use the standards to integrate into requests for proposals, for monitoring, and for quality assurance. And families are so integral to this process as well, and can use the standards to partner with programs to apply the standards and provide feedback about how well the program is applying the standards. And so knowing we have program level folks here today, what does it look like to use those standards? And so it does require the commitment and the support of all levels of program responsibility. So it's not something an executive director could do by herself. It's not something a direct service staff could do by himself. All of these groups are coming together and working together to implement the standards at the program level. So these standards are, they bring together two foundational frameworks from this field, and you can see them here on the slide. So we'll talk about them briefly today. So the first is the Principles of Family Support Practice that was developed by Family Support America, and the Research-Based and Evidence-Informed Strengthening Families Protective Factor Framework, which was developed by the Center for the Study of Social Policy, and you may know those as the 5 protective factors. So let's talk a little bit about these two frameworks that the standards are based upon. So I have a quick poll before we dive into this framework. Whoops. And so curious, how many of you have heard of this framework before today, which is the 9 principles of family support practice? So take a moment to let us know if you've heard of these before today. Okay, let's take a peek at these results. So it looks like we are about 50-50. Okay, well, that's great that some of you already have. Wonderful. And for those of you that have not, fear not, we will make sure you are up to date. Yes. All right. So let's take a look at this. So the first principle that you see here on the slide is that staff and families work together in relationships based on equality and on respect. So while this principle may not seem so revolutionary today, at the time that it was written, it presented quite a challenge to the system. So at the time, the prevailing wisdom was that the staff were the experts with their education, their knowledge, and their experience, and that their goal was to quote unquote fix the problem family. But this principle, it very much challenged that notion by saying that the staff and families are actually equal. So, of course, the staff do come to the table with their education, their knowledge, and their experience. But the families, they also bring their own strengths and resources and are the most knowledgeable about their past experiences. And it is by working as partners in relationships based on equality and on respect that we will achieve the best outcomes for families. So, our second principle is that staff enhance families' capacity to support the growth and the development of all family members, so adults, youth, and children. And so, this principle is important because it emphasizes that we in this field look at the whole family, not just the individual. So, if one member of the family is participating in our activities, we want to be asking about and inviting other members of the family as well. We know that when multiple family members are involved, the family is more likely to have better outcomes. And the third principle says that families are resources to their own members, to other families, to programs, and to their communities. So, unique to this field, unique to this perspective, is that we don't see staff as having all of the answers or doing all of the work to support families. Families themselves are encouraged to support and to engage with other families. So, there is that strong emphasis on connecting families to share resources such as information and peer support. The fourth principle that you see here is, oh, what happened? Sorry, restarting here. That was bizarre. Give me one moment here and we will resume right where we were. Sorry, one moment, please. Computer thinks it's a Monday. Well, it is not. Okay. Try that again. Okay. Hopefully you can see that. Okay. Sorry about that. So diving right back into the fourth principle. So this principle says that programs affirm and strengthen families' cultural, racial, and linguistic identities and enhance their ability to function in a multicultural society. So this principle is commonly referred to as the diversity principle, and it has two parts. So the first part that's very important is about respecting and welcoming the diversity that families bring, be that linguistic diversity, cultural diversity, family structure, things like that. And then the second part is about preparing them for and connecting them with the larger community where they will naturally interact with people very different from themselves. So this will support them to fully participate in the very diverse society in which we live. The fifth principle says that programs are embedded in their communities and contribute to the community building process. So these programs, the family support programs, do not see themselves as simply social service providers, but as community builders as well. So by strengthening families, they make a key contribution to the health of communities. And they also work to develop families' responsibility and leadership for strengthening and building their communities. And the sixth principle says that programs advocate with families for services and systems that are fair and responsive and accountable to the families served. So take a minute to think about some of the major systems that families are interacting with. So maybe education, healthcare, the legal system. So let's ask ourselves, are these systems fair and responsive and accountable? And so often not is the answer. So sometimes yes, sometimes no, but often not. And so that's where our very important work comes in as family support providers to work with families to help improve these systems. Let's take a look at the seventh principle. So this says that practitioners are working with families to mobilize formal and informal resources to support family development. So there is a strong emphasis in the family support field on resources. And the most common type of family support program is called a family resource center. So you can see there right in the name, the emphasis is on resources. And so while no one program could directly provide all of the supports that a family might need, it is our responsibility to know where to connect them to them. Let's look at the eighth principle here. So the eighth principle says that programs are flexible and continually responsive to emerging family and community issues. So the concept of flexibility, and responsiveness are so important in this field because neighborhoods and communities change. And so a neighborhood that is majority Latinx today might be majority Asian in 5 years. So issues do emerge that significantly affect families, such as economic downturn, the pandemic, things like that. So programs need to be flexible and responsive to these changes. And the last principle, last but not least, is the ninth one. So this one says that these principles of family support are modeled in all program activities, including planning, governance, and administration. So this principle is what we call the catch-all principle. And it says that all of the above principles are should be applied in everything we do. So whether it's planning, governance, administration. And so these principles have implications for how we develop programs, how they're led, and how we support our staff. Okay, so that's the first framework that the standards are based upon. Let's take a look at the second one. So before we dive into this, let's take a peek at a poll. Curious, how many of you have heard of the Strengthening Families Protective Factors Framework, or the 5 protective factors for short? All right, take just another moment to let us know if you have heard of this framework before today. All righty, let's see those results. All right, well, that's great. It looks like many of you have heard of this framework before today. That's wonderful. And some not yet, so that's okay. In a few minutes, you'll be able to say yes as well. So, this framework was developed by the Center for the Study of Social Policy back in 2005, and it is research based and evidence informed. And it has been shown to increase family stability, enhance child development, and reduce the likelihood of child abuse and neglect. Let's take a look at what the protective factors actually are. And so they're here on the slide. So we have parental resilience, social connections, concrete support in times of need, knowledge of parenting and child development, and the social and emotional competence of children. So, we invite you after today to dive into these and learn more about them. There is tons of information on the Center for the Study of Social Policy's website. So if you go to cssp.org and click on the Strengthening Families tab, you'll be able to dive right in and learn all about these protective factors. So that is the second framework that the standards are based upon. And so here on the slide, you'll actually see the sections of the standards of quality. So each of these 5 sections represent a key element of quality practice. So we have family centeredness, family strengthening, diversity, equity, and inclusion, community strengthening, and evaluation. So each of these sections are very important. And when we're talking about these standards, there are actually 15 of them within this framework. And each of each standard includes 1 to 2 sets of indicators of both foundational quality and high quality. So the foundational quality indicators, they demonstrate the basic application of the standard. And then the programs actually build upon the foundational quality indicators to achieve the high quality indicators, which represents deeper integration of the standard. And then each indicator is followed by 2 to 4 examples from the field that illustrate its application. So these examples are provided as illustrators and are certainly not meant to be a checklist or a checklist at all. We don't want you to limit yourself to the ones that you'll see here. And then in the certification training on the standards, a significant focus is on participants having space and the opportunity to think of their own examples that demonstrate the indicators in ways that are relevant to their own programs. And so as programs are applying these standards, they are encouraged to identify their own examples that demonstrate the indicators in ways that are relevant to their own communities. So let's look at this together here. So we'll talk about the difference between foundational and high quality. So foundational quality indicators create a solid foundation for family support and strengthening programs. And then the foundational quality indicators, they are designed to be met within the basic resources of a typical family strengthening and support program. And high quality indicators are built upon foundational quality being in place first. So we aren't just jumping to high quality, we have to have that solid foundation under us. And programs are encouraged to strive to meet high quality indicators in order to serve families most effectively. And so some high quality indicators, they may require additional capacity building or additional resources to meet. So let's look at the bottom of this slide together here. You'll see the quality continuum. So we start on the left with foundational quality not yet addressed. And then we are approaching foundational quality, and then we are meeting foundational quality there in the middle. So that is where quality begins. And then we continue along the continuum to approach high quality and meet both foundational and high quality. So you'll see at the bottom that the arrow keeps going after we have already met both foundational and high quality. So this is because quality improvement, it's very much an ongoing continuous process. And so this is why high quality is not maximum quality. So you won't ever hear that phrase. And so implementing these standards, it's very much a developmental process. And it's very common that programs may see aspects of their work at different points along the quality continuum. And so as we go through the standards today, you may determine that you are already doing quality work in some areas, and then hopefully you also can identify areas to work on further. So let's take a look at this arrow. So for the first four sections of the standards, this is the arrow that we use to explain the movement from foundational to high quality. So on the left, we see foundational quality, and on the right, we see high quality, which represents that deeper integration of the standards into the program. So, what moves us from foundational to high quality are the elements in the arrow. So, the first one we'll talk about is formal structure. So, these are things like design, policies, procedures, and intentional strategies with committed resources that ensure consistency of practice. And then we have staff training. So, this is staff training to support the implementation of the standard. And then we have family partnerships. So we're actually partnering with families in the implementation of the standard. So each of these elements helps ensure that the standards are more deeply integrated into the program practice. So, for example, at foundational quality, we may do something that is good practice, but how are we ensuring that it wasn't just a one-time occurrence? And then at high quality, we've actually set up systems and training, and or we have partnered with families to help ensure that it does continue to happen. So the particular elements and the number of elements that are needed for high quality differ for various indicator pairs. So sometimes it's one of these, sometimes it's two, sometimes it's all three, but it's never anything other than these three. So let's take a look. You can peek here, glimpse inside the standards. This is an actual page out of the standards. So the standard here is that the program engages families to participate in program development and implementation. And the foundational quality indicator is that the program solicits input from families to shape and plan the program and services. And let's look here at the difference between foundational and high quality. You can see in the arrow, we have formal structure and family partnership, which is how we're getting to high quality. And then you'll see in the high quality indicator that we have put the the formal structure and the family partnership components that are represented that move us there, we put those in bold and italic. So you'll see design, you'll see partnering with family. So it's very clear to see. And so let's fast forward to the evaluation section. So evaluation is so cool that it gets its very own arrow. So as with the arrow that we used in the first four sections of the standards, we see foundational quality on the left and high quality on the right, which again represents that deeper integration into the program. But the elements are different for the evaluation section. So in the evaluation section, we move to high quality with these three elements. So the first is data analysis. So collecting data is foundational, but analyzing the data is what moves us to high quality. And sharing evaluation results. So we're sharing these results with various stakeholders, such as the families that we're working with. And program modification. So this means changing the program as a result of what we learn from evaluation. So we aren't just doing the evaluation for evaluation's sake. We're actually doing something with it. So that is a bit about the evaluation arrow. Let's take a peek at these tools that you have access to. So the first tool that we'll talk about is the program self-assessment tool. And so this is designed for program teams of managers and direct service staff and parent leaders all coming together to reflect on standards implementation and quality improvement. So this is designed to be used as a critical thinking exercise by teams. And it's recommended that all team members involved have been trained on the standards first prior to using this tool. The second tool that we'll talk about is the staff self-reflection tool. And so this consists of 18 questions for staff members to use as a daily reminder to implement the standards. And they're encouraged to put this in a place where they'll see it regularly, so maybe above their desks. And the standards participant survey is the other tool that we'll talk about here. And this also has 18 questions on it. And this is for program participants to complete and share how well the program is meeting the standards from the participant's point of view. So it's not a typical satisfaction survey. And the questions actually mirror those on the staff tool. So if staff members are mindful of these questions, then the program participants are likely to give the program high scores. And again, all of these tools are available on the NFSN website and are included in the standards training where you'll have a chance to explore them in more depth. So that's a little bit about the tools. And so let's talk about the training. The training is very much a fundamental strategy for implementing these standards. And the certification training is in either in-person or virtual training that is designed for all management and direct service staff, and as well as for funders. And so participants receive a certificate that is valid for 2 years from when they are trained. And we are so glad that you're here for today's webinar, but just as a reminder that this is not the training itself. In order to receive a certificate, you would want to participate in the certification training, and I'll tell you more about that later today. So the certification training is conducted by pairs of trained trainers from member networks from across the National Family Support Network. And so networks, funders, and other stakeholders can also contract with the NFSN to host a certification training for programs in your area if there's not yet trainers in your state. And programs are highly encouraged to come as teams of both management and direct service staff to this training because successful application of the standards requires the commitment and the support of all levels of program responsibility. And with this, individuals are certified, not organizations, which integrates the standards into everyone's work and provides a professional credential for staff. And all of the trainings are done live because the group work is so important. The peer sharing, learning from each other is so valuable to the process of learning about the standards. And then the Training of Trainer Institute is either 4-day in person or 5-day virtual training for representatives of NFSN member networks to be able to conduct the certification training in their state. So only networks that are network representatives are trained to be trainers, which supports their capacity building and establishes a unique, essential, and ongoing role for them within their system of support for families in their state. So let's take a look at where the standards have been over the past decade. So you'll see here we have trained over 14,000 people on the standards, and that there's over 100 trainers that are currently delivering this training from across member networks from the NFSN. So stay tuned. This map continues to grow and change each month. And so looking at this data, you'll see the impact that the training is having on folks from across the country. And you'll see that 91% of folks are saying that the standards are enhancing their programs work with families. And at least 85% of folks are reporting that they're using these tools. So really incredible to see the impact here. And I'll give you just a moment to read a little bit more about that training impact here. Okay, so as you can see here, the standards very much help validate existing work by benchmarking it to national best practice. And I know we have some network level folks here as well. So just want to highlight too quickly that networks have formed and expanded through the standard certification training. So, for example, in Arizona, the standards provided a common language for diverse providers across the state and established a key role for the Maricopa Family Support Alliance in promoting quality practice within their system of care. And as a result, the alliance grew from 21 members to 72 agencies in just a few short years. So, pretty incredible. And so networks have also strengthened their capacity and their sustainability of it through developing trained trainers. And so all funds actually that are generated through the standard certification training are invested back into supporting networks. And in order to ensure the accessibility and the affordability of this standard certification training, networks with certified trainers, they only charge participants up to $150. So intentionally keeping that affordable so everyone's able to access it. So let's take a look at this tool. This is also on the website for you to check out on that implementation tab under the standards. So this tool walks us through how programs can implement these standards. So I know we have lots of program level folks here today. So this tool is one that you'll find particularly helpful. So there are steps across the top, and then there's sample activities that are associated with each of those steps. And then there's resources and cost, the potential cost for each of these down at the bottom. So encourage you to download this. I know the font is really small to try to look at it now, but encourage you to download it and check this out. By being here today, you're already in that prepare phase by checking out this standards overview webinar. So I encourage you to look at this and plot along your path there. And I would like to share just briefly a little bit about my experience using the standards at the program level. So, prior to my joining the National Family Support Network back in 2018, I managed a family resource center here in upstate New York in Corning, New York, which is the Nani Hood Parent and Family Resource Center. So, when I began at this family resource center, we were implementing the Strengthening Families Protective Factors. So, like you all, we were using those, as were many other family resource centers across the state. So, we used the Protective Factor Survey. We had space for drop and play. We had parent-child groups and activities, and provided parent education opportunities. We held parenting groups. We used the ages and stages questionnaire screening. We provided information and referrals and had a supervised visitation program. We held community events. So we were doing great work in the center, serving families as best we knew how at the time. And then here's just a little glimpse into what our after we discovered the standards looked like. So, and then it was in 2016, actually, the New York State Family Resource Center Network became a member of the National Family Support Network and brought the standards of quality training to us in family resource centers in New York State. So managers, directors, direct service staff, everyone from across the state participated in the standards certification training. And then 12 of us actually went on to become trainers. We went to the Training of Trainer Institute to become trainers on the standards to create more capacity in the state as we began implementing the standards. So through using these standards, our Family Resource Center saw that these standards very much enhanced what we were able to do and what we were already doing. So not reinventing the wheel, very much strengthening what we were already doing. So we were actually able to increase childcare offerings for parent education classes to better meet parents' needs and to ensure that we were reducing as many barriers as possible for participation for parents. And the staff began to work with families more to complete parent identified needs and goals, recognizing that the parents are the experts on their families. And so these standards also gave us the structure to increase the formal structure around our outreach strategies. So, again, not creating extra work, but helping us work smarter, not harder in our efforts. These standards also helped us to improve our database system. And this included the analysis of the data, making sure that our programming was doing what we wanted it to do. And so these standards helped us to create new opportunities to educate parents on advocacy and on leadership. And also, through adopting the standards, we realized how crucial it was to have parents formally at the table and to help them develop and plan programming. So, just 2 short months after having participated in the standards training, I had the opportunity to participate in the very first, the inaugural Developing and Sustaining Effective Parent Advisory Committee training that the NFSN offers. And had that opportunity to gather the concrete tools to start a parent advisory committee. So once we started that parent advisory committee, it was so exciting to see the enhanced ownership of the families, what that looked like. They now had that new enhanced sense of ownership. So just a glimpse into our little before and after, a little bit about my experience and the difference that the standards had. So let's look one level up. So the network levels, the networks are the ones that are bringing these individual programs together. And so here is a roadmap that the networks can use as they are using the standard. So again, similar format, looks identical as far as layout. So we have the steps along the top, sample activities, various resources, and potential costs associated with each of those. So again, starting out in that prepare phase, by being here today, you are already in that prepare phase. Participating in the certification training is already at column 3. So encourage you to download this and take a look and see where you are and plot out some future next steps. And definitely reach out to us if you need any guidance or support as you venture along this journey. And so similar to how I had shared a program level examples, we want to share a little bit about what network implementation of the standards might look like as well. So this is the roadmap, just very high level, of course, of the New York State network and how we use the standards. So like I said, the New York State Network brought the standard certification training to FRCs in New York. Intentionally, the network wrote the standards in as one of their grantee requirements to ensure quality and consistent programming across the state. And so all programs across the state began using the standards tools and completing the self-assessment tool annually. And so the New York State Network very much continues today to use the standards as a catalyst for enhancing work with families across the state. And here you'll see this is a network implementation example from another network. And this implementation diagram demonstrates how they're using the standards as a network. And they take a 3-pronged strategy that integrates them into training, evaluation, and membership. And all networks are encouraged to develop their own implementation plan. Here's one other one that comes to us from the Colorado Network. So in their network, all staff are at the centers, regardless of their roles, are completing the certification training. And then staff that are working with families and their supervisors complete the 14-hour online Strengthening Families training that's offered by the Children's Trust Fund Alliance. And then there's particular training for those that are working directly with families. So this is just another implementation example for networks. Okay, so as you're processing all of this, I know it's a lot of information, some considerations to take into as, why might these standards be beneficial to you? So they can help deepen practice and they can establish a common language across different kinds of programs. So family resource centers, home visiting programs, all of these different family support programs are able to come together and to be able to speak the same language. They also are a great opportunity to partner and come together with other organizations. They utilize shared measurement systems, another consideration. And as you are looking for something concrete to advance diversity, equity, and inclusion, these standards are a concrete way to do that. And to be part of a national movement is another consideration as you're thinking through these standards. And so after these webinars, a lot of times we'd get emails and messages like, okay, this sounds so great, but what next? What can I do next? So we made this slide so you have some suggested next steps depending on where you already are. So if you haven't already, we encourage you to download the standards and to review them. So if you go to nationalfamilysupportnetwork.org and hover over standards of quality, a drop-down menu will appear and you'll click on overview, and that is where you'll download the standards. And then we encourage you to review possible next steps along the program or network implementation continuous. So again, if you go to the website and nationalfamilysupportnetwork.org, hover over standards, and if you drop down to implementation tools, that is where you'll find both of these implementation continua, as well as the other implementation tools that we highlighted. And we also encourage you to participate in a standard certification training that is offered by your state or the national network. And so for funders and states without networks currently offering the standards, you can review the standards training page to learn about how to contract with the national network to bring the training to your state so they can benefit from it as well. So if you go to nationalfamilysupportnetwork.org, hover over standards, drop down to certification training, you'll be able to see all of the upcoming standards trainings that are currently scheduled across the country. So you can reach out to your point of contact in your state if you see one down towards the bottom of the page. If you don't see one, that means the standards are not currently offered yet in your state. So you can either bring them to your state, you can participate in an open training to check them out. Definitely encourage you to do that. Okay, so we have this slide here as a reminder to ask questions. So if you've been mulling things over and have questions, please open that Q&A portion of the Zoom console and enter in your questions there. And so we'll give you a moment to do that. And while you're mulling over any questions that you may have, want to share a couple other resources with you as well. So we have upcoming webinar Wednesdays. We have, oh gosh, this is not updated, disregard. Sorry about that. Oh, here it is. Okay, sorry. Here's February's. Okay, we're not back to November. So here's February's and March. We have a couple coming up. We also have one that we're going to be offering in February as well, that registration's not open just yet, is we'll be highlighting programs that are using the standards so you can learn more about their program level implementation. So if you're not already signed up for updates, make sure you go to the website and sign up for our newsletter so you'll get those, and that way you'll be able to receive registration information as soon as that comes out. But in the meantime, feel free to check out our Webinar Wednesdays page. And on that, you'll see upcoming webinars. You'll see we have an entire library. You can click on from the webinar page, you can click on the standards and just navigate through and be able to learn about how other programs are using the standards. There's FRC ones, there's so many different sub libraries on the Webinar Wednesday page. So encourage you to check those out. I know I had referenced briefly the Developing and Sustaining Effective Parent Advisory Committee training, but want to make sure you know how to access that. So this training is for whether you're starting a new parent advisory committee or whether you're wanting to strengthen one that you already have. But it's all of the concrete tools that you need to tuck in your tool belt. It's co-trained by a NFSN staff member as well as a national parent leader. And so we have openings still that you can get into in January. Registration closes actually tomorrow for that one. So get into that one if you are able to. And we have one in February as well. So that is the Parent Advisory Committee training. And where did it go? And then we also have the standards training. We have on the website, if you go to the certification training page, you can access the open trainings for the standards training as well. So definitely encourage you to check that out. We have, similar to the Parent Advisory Committee training, we have open trainings in both January and February as well. So be sure to check that out before registration closes. I'll put my contact information up here. But let's go to questions. Okay, so there's a question from Bethany, which is, what were the 9 principles called that these standards are based off of? So the standards are based on the 2 frameworks. So it's the Principles of Family Support Practice, which is one, and then the Strengthening Families Protective Factors framework. So the principles, they were developed by Family Support America, and that organization has actually sunset. So that organization no longer exists, but their valuable work continues to live and go on in the work of the standard. So if you go to on the National Network website, I think there's a page called Frameworks where you can access the principles themselves, and you can also access them through downloading the standard. So if you have any more questions, feel free to put that in the chat or in the Q&A, sorry. Let's see. Oh, and I see there's some activity in the chat too. Stephanie asks, does Florida have a state network? And yes, Florida does have a state network. And so if you go to nationalfamilysupportnetwork.org, and you can click About Us and drop down to membership, you'll be able to see that green map that we shared. And it's actually an interactive map. So you can, if you click on Florida, for example, it will pop up their state snapshot. So you'll be able to learn how many members they have and, whether or not they work with the standards, things like that. So yes. All right. Great. Let's see here. And there's questions about the standards and their use internationally. So this is still very much in the works, Catherine. Yeah, really good question. When we did the last review and revision, we knew that Canada was very interested in the standards and wanted to use them. So they actually were part of the review and revision process. So you'll see examples and things in the standards that are reflective of Canada. And so you'll see that represented there. But we would love to continue and start a conversation with you about you bringing the standards outside of the US to your country. So definitely send us an email. My email's right up there on the slides. Would love to have a conversation with you, and just to have that discussion. We would be honored. All right. Well, if there's no other questions, we would love to connect with you beyond the webinar today. Thank you again so much for participating in today's webinar. As a reminder, when you exit out of the webinar, an evaluation will pop up where, if you don't mind, we would greatly appreciate you taking the time to complete that. It very much helps inform future webinars, and it's very helpful for that feedback. So thanks again for participating. We hope that you have a lovely rest of your Wednesday. And as mentioned in the chat, a recording of this webinar, as well as the link to the materials, will be found on the webinar Wednesday page by this time tomorrow afternoon. So be sure to access that, and all of the slides will be there as well, so you can access that. So thanks again so much for being here today. Have a lovely rest of your Wednesday. Bye-bye.